Talk360. Talk360 for in-depth analysis on the week's news with Latif.
We are required today to prepay duty for product 2 days, isn't it? Now, if I'm going to go and borrow money to actually pay for product and then just hold it there is no incentive, isn't it? So then we need to explore ways, now that the tankage in Mombasa is increasing, there's a new tankage that's coming up, then we need to start finding a way to actually lengthen that period of duty or duty-free product, bonded facility. That way then we are able to start smoothing out supply shocks, isn't it? Then the country starts to enjoy the benefits of having strategic storage without having paid for it. So I think then the other issues that cause supply shortages, like the pipeline line out, then will not be a big problem, because really if the line is out, it takes you something like 10 hours to get product from Mombasa to Nairobi, even if it's on track. It's not the most ideal, but we avoid situations of stockouts. Thanks.
Eric, I think I'll begin from the point that you started when you gave them more time. You are talking about, for me it's very interesting, it's like a vision statement set by anybody in the petroleum industry. They say the same words, from the marketers to the minister, and I'm not surprised they have said actually the same. They're futuristic, and there's nothing wrong with anybody planning to salvage the situation. So planning, as far as planning, they sound like Vision 2030. Guys, wait until 2030, things will be sorted out. But what we are talking about are the little things that we think they can do. Look at the example they use of that taxi. Somebody waiting beyond time. Question is, what is being done for those fellows who are waiting beyond time? The regulator has not said anything
to punish them.
Yes, to punish them.
Right.
Then you remember when the November supply, when the tender was cancelled, the PS was quoted as having blamed the junior officers, but no sanctions were reportedly given to those particular officers. So the PS may have acknowledged there was a problem, but again, no sanctions were being given. So I want us to look at very basic things. One is, how does all these things affect the consumer when they talk about clogging the system, which they only want to appear to dismiss, in a very nice language, as an operational issue? So how are those operational lapses causing the consumer? Look at the National Oil Corporation of Kenya. For example, it's partially 100% by the taxpayer. For example, if they are supposed to stabilize, to what extent are they stabilizing? Look at the regulator. To be fair to the word called regulation, regulation means appreciate their problems, all those challenges. And, to sit around here and purport that we'll have another refinery maybe in our lifetime might not be necessarily possible. So why can't we look at things that are possible? So the question we're trying to look at, and most of the issues, actually, they are soft issues. You see the minister addressing very hard issues, we will do this, we'll do that. That, of course, is a major contribution. But look at one of the things that is actually, for me, is laughable. Power interruptions is the same ministry that actually has been able to do the so-called independent power producers, Acrecos and the likes. I mean, a very important facility like that. Do you want to plan for how many years to get the generators so that you don't have power supply? I mean, so there are some things that we are saying, I think they need to be addressed.
So you think there's general lethargy, basically, from especially the ministry and the regulator?
And it's not by accident. What worries us is by design. In the meantime, somebody is benefiting, somebody is paying the price. You look at the difference. Because I do not think Francis will still be in business if they are not making profits. Look at the marketers generally. But who's addressing grievance redressed by the consumers? They are none. So we are looking at those basic things and asking, what is it they can do? And I was talking about regulation. For example, we've been told the pricing, they have no control about the global international price. That's a fact. But what do they have control over? For example, the fuel products actually affect the rest of the economy. What is it they can discuss as a regulator, for example, to attempt to stabilize prices? Last week, and we want to appreciate publicly, we want to appreciate the regulator, we had actually a public forum with them, and they answered a lot of questions at City Hall. And one of the issues we were asking them, what if you consider the frequency within which you review the pricing? It has positives, whoever the officer who came, I think, was very articulate. He gave the pros and cons. But look at things like the period of reviews. If you're in business, you probably are manufacturing Colgate or whatever it is. If you are told prices are going to be adjusted, erratical as they are, I mean, how do you plan your business? It's difficult.
It's affecting
Yes. So 4 weeks, what is the magic about 4 weeks every 1 month? So there are issues. But, when we call for stakeholder discussions, it's very difficult to have this kind of discussions. That is why I began by saying, I think you've scored a big high as Capital FM to give us this opportunity to have the regulator and the marketer in the same forum.
Has this ever happened at a roundtable where the Petroleum Institute of East Africa and the regulator and the Consumer Federation actually exchanged notes? Have you ever, as a Consumer Federation, as a man who watches out, who has our back, have you ever gotten in touch with the Petroleum Institute of East Africa? Yeah,
we do. At an operational level, we do. Of course, we do. And the people normally we interact with, of course, are not the decision makers. So there's a bit of we do operation, in terms of operations. But look at even the marketers. There is almost a thin line between the marketers, the government, and the regulator. And where is the consumer in all this? So these are some of the things. Yes, to answer your question, of course, is not yes. The few occasions we've met, the quality of those discussions, again, are very, very highly skewed to those kind of recitations, or we'll do this next year, subject to funds are allowing, those kind of discussions.
The Petroleum Institute of East Africa, let me ask you, is there a role for the consumers to actually maybe have sort of periodic engagements with the industry? Because the Petroleum Institute of East Africa is looking at that level from the level of best practice and all, just to get the feedback of the consumers.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. I think the Petroleum Institute does regularly engage, because it's a member of the Kenya Private Sector Alliance. It does regularly engage with other bodies, and I'm sure Steve has actually met the general manager, who is fully authorized actually to speak on behalf of PIA.
Yeah.
Now,
and the general manager has executive powers.
Executive powers, an executive officer.
Right.
And what you will find maybe a frustration for you is that PIA does not deal with commercial issues, isn't it? And unfortunately, the bread and butter issues that concern the consumer really is not about standards. It's not about standard having a fiberglass tank or whatever. Mm-hmm. Those things really are altruist, isn't it? Mm. They are for improvement of the industry, but the consumer wants to know, how can we get the most competitive prices? Unfortunately, that's a tough question, and it's not going to be, and I appreciate what Steve is saying, it's not something that has there's no silver bullet for it, isn't it? It's so many things. I'll give you an example just for everybody's consideration. This road, since we've been talking about the Hurlingham Road, isn't it, has one of the highest property prices. Today, the land value does not actually pay to have a petrol station in that place.
Along Hurlingham.
And where things went wrong is a long time ago, when regulation, and maybe all of you know that you get there's the zoning laws that actually certify this is a public toilet, this is going to be a parcel of land for a kindergarten and things like that. Now, what that does is that since public toilets are for common good and the kindergarten is for common good, it should not be commercialized, isn't it? Now, PSS sites, petrol station sites, are supposed to be exactly the same way, such that then they're not subjected to the same economics of a 10-story building, isn't it? Yeah. So really, if you ask somebody whether do you want to construct a Yaya Center or a gas station, you may find that actually the gas station will be soon out of the way. Then what does that do to the consumer's requirements, right, isn't it? That's just one example. The rest is about how do we finance our product, how do we keep it, as you said, how do we ensure that we have adequate stocks without actually causing the cost of carrying that stock actually to translate into the pump price. How do we ensure let's say adequate and reliable power to ensure that then the pipeline is running all the time. All these things will improve as 1 cent, 2 cents, 3 cents here. We had a dialogue once, and we had a discussion and said to KRA that yes, we appreciate your role to collect revenues, but when we're doing a transaction and have to send somebody to the border to collect a piece of paper stamped exported, when they have an electronic system, and deliver it to Mombasa to have that cancelled, it costs a few thousand shillings to deliver one piece of paper. That translates into the cost of fuel, isn't it? So these small inefficiencies actually add up to something significant. And there are inefficiencies across the system. From the principals of owners of the infrastructure, that is the refinery, the pipeline, to the marketers, to the various governmental bodies, to other counterparties that are necessary for the business.
Yeah.
Everybody can do a bit better to help this. But the reality is that global prices are going up, isn't it? Unless this country starts to produce its own oil, we will be subjected to the world prices as they are.
And now, actually, we have our own oil. We just don't know how much of our own oil we have, and when it'll ever enter into our pipeline. And I know that PIA had organized an upstream forum just earlier in the week. Was that actually to discuss things like this, of where our future would be and how to make sure that we fine-tune some of these challenges?
Yes, there was a very successful Upstream Summit that was held on Thursday and Friday. It was organized by PIA, basically bringing in all stakeholders. And the reason is to have a dialogue. We understand that it takes really, from the moment you have a commercially viable find to actual production of the oil commercially and receiving revenues, about 5 year period. Now, 5 year period may seem long, but a lot needs to go in during that time. So we want to see that
we maximize the 5 years.
There is a lot that is done to make sure that when the oil revenues start they help the consumer of Kenya. We as a downstream marketer or marketers, we thrive when our consumer thrives, isn't it? If today the consumer is able to purchase a bit more, then we're doing better, isn't it?
Yeah.
So we are interested in an indirect way to ensure that the revenues are applied properly, to ensure that the consumer now is wealthier. And when the consumer is wealthier, everybody who is involved in supply chain will do well.
Yeah.
Then there are also the issues about the standards, the issues to ensure that there's talk about local content. We don't want to see that the local content that is procured within the country is just the low value local content. So how do we ensure that we have through the Petroleum Institute School of Professional Studies, we have people who are able actually to provide the skilled labor across the value chain, isn't it?
Yeah.
So 5 years is adequate to train human resources to make sure that people are able to play a critical role in that sense. Entrepreneurs are able to come and supply not just the low value items, but they're able to supply it, whatever. I think that is one of the key things that we wanted.
Yeah, Eric, I think it will only be fair in terms of looking at now, in terms of issues that, we've talked more about problems. But one of the problems that we've seen, look at the statement that was made when we began the meeting, that the tendering is actually coordinated by the Minister of Energy. Now, the Minister of Energy, through the same PS, is a member of the ERC. A couple of months ago, the Minister for Energy, made one of the most outrageous things, appointed the general manager of the PIEA. Until there was public protest, that was when the appointment was revoked. So there have been deliberate attempts, by evidence, if I can give you just that, there have been a deliberate attempt to try and address governance in the wrong way in terms of the sector, because all these issues, people mean well, there's nothing wrong with people, but I think the structures, the kind of duplicity, the kind of one man being regulator, one man being the head of a ministry, one man being head of all this begins a problem. But moving forward, I think one of the things we need to start addressing is, for example, how do we induce competition in the sector? Because if there was a serious competition, the consumer will always be laughing his way. Look at what's happening in the telecommunication sector. Until the Minister for Finance is actually almost attempting to give sanctions that if you are having any zero free promotion, like one of the operators actually, then you have to be sort of penalized. Is that happening in the oil sector? No. The operators, maybe the main ones, are always talking about, in fact, sometimes they have ghost laws. You've noticed on occasion when the regulator has perhaps given what is not what they like, they might not say it here, but sometimes there's no fuel for quite a while when the fuel is actually very low. But when it's high, of course, it starts getting into the new pricing even before it gets to the midnight. So there are some issues that we really need to address. Then finally,
yes,
it will for me be very interesting just to address the capacity for ERC.